My name's Rod and this is the Orca Boat Shop. We're going to pick up from the last episode where all the seat risers or cleats went in, and now I'm going to make the seats or thwarts that fit into the fore and center section of the boat. So let's get to it.
I started out by ripping my 1-inch thick nice clear cedar down to 1 inch less than the completed width of these thwarts. And I did this because I'm going to trim the edges a little bit later. So I trimmed one edge, then reset the saw, trimmed the other edge, so I have two nice clean surfaces. Following that, I just marked right down the center of my piece of lumber, as I want to measure everything off the center, and that would mean the center longitudinally and the center from end to end. Now I'll also point out that I started out making two seats exactly the same as in the plans, but then I realized, of course, that I'm building the sailing version here, so the forward seat needs to have extra meat and lumber on it to accommodate for the mast partner, which is the section in the seat in which the mast will go through and rest on the mast step down in the bottom of the boat. So I ended up having to, after making these two seats, I ended up having to trim off one of the edges and add some lumber on so that I could create the shape of the forward seat. I'm going to be adding 1/2 inch of hardwood on either edge, so I've cut the board down to 7 inches. Total width will be 8 in the center, and then the design shows that the thwart or seat tapers from wide at 8 inches to 6 inches on the end. So I have marked off either end at 5 inches, knowing I'm going to add 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch there. Now it's just a matter of trying to create a gentle taper through. I don't want a straight line through there. So we'll mark off some sections here. Let's say at every 8 inches. 8, 16. I'm marking from center out because this board's a little extra long, so I'm not measuring from the ends in. And I'm going to put a mark across. As well. All going to be planed down from 1 inch to 7/8, so I'm not too worried about all the marks. Try to go from full 7. What if we take off 1/4 inch here? This is just a little test run here to see. 1/4 inch there. 1/2 inch there to there. What will that look like if I run a batten through there? Guess we'll do the other end as well. 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. With the 1/2 inch added either side, we bring the full width in the center to 8 and 6 on the ends. That one's ready to go on the bandsaw. Repeat the process for the center thwart, which is a little bit longer. With the rough cut on the bandsaw, just moved it over to my bench. Started off trying to plane down to my lines with my block plane. But then I soon realized that was really not working for me, so I moved to my number 3 bench plane. Then just using my small square, just checking to make sure that everything is nice and clean, because I'm going to be gluing on some lumber onto those edges, and I want a nice, clean, tight fit in joint. I've cut up a couple of nice pieces of mahogany, which are going to be the face edges of the thwarts or seats. I have checked to make sure that yes, I can make them bend into the edges here without too much effort. Some clamps. So I need to coat everything here with a thin coat of epoxy or unthickened epoxy. I'm using the fast hardener. It's 90 degrees out here today. It's going to be a scorcher, but I think I can do this fast enough. I'm going to coat all the surfaces now with mahogany. I'm just going to brush on one coat of unthickened. On the cedar, I'm going to go with 2, sort of follow back and do a second coat, because that cedar can really suck it up. And then we'll thicken it up and add some more. Now I haven't mixed up too much of epoxy here as well. I did a couple of pumps. I don't know if that'll be enough, but I don't need it to be too much. Can always mix up more, in that the more I mix up, the faster it's going to heat up. So let's keep it to a working minimum amount here, so that I don't have it kicking off in the cup. And of course, you know, once we spread it out thinly on the wood here, it's going to dissipate any heat and take a little bit longer to harden up. And I'm not too concerned about being terribly tidy. These pieces are 1 inch thick. Finished thickness dimensions of the thwart itself is 7/8. So we're going to clean off a little bit. And the purpose of the edge as well makes it appear a little nicer, but it's also going to stiffen up the thwart itself. The plans don't have any indications for center supports, but you know, we can always add that if we want or need. So I'm not too worried about that, but definitely it tends to stiffen it up a little bit, and let's get that over there. Prevent, you know, after years of wet, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, that the seat starts to sag in the middle, which I've seen on lots of little boats that have come in for repairs over the years. The other thing too is that the hardwood edge is a little bit harder to wear. I mean, again, it would take years and years, but I have seen boats in which, you know, the edges of the actual thwart are worn from people, fishing, equipment, who knows what, dinged, dented. All these things add to premature need for some sort of repair. So now if we swing back to look at the edges here, the cedar, we can brush on a little bit more. I'd rather have too much than not enough. Now if wood is cold, it's not going to soak up as much epoxy, even if your epoxy's warm. So if you really want good absorption in cold wood, you can take a heat gun to this and watch the epoxy thin down and completely disappear into the wood. This is not terribly structural, so as long as I get a bond, I'm good. No delaminations happening. To calculate the length of the thwart or seat, I've just clamped 2 sticks together and pushed them all the way out to the planking on both sides, resting on the seat riser. That is going to give me the bottom edge length
on the seat itself. Now I want a little bit of clearance on both ends. I don't really want the end of the seat rubbing on the planking as the boat flexes and moves. So we're going to go with 50, since it's a little over 50, or sorry, a little shy of 50. And we'll consider this to be the bottom side, so that's 50 on the aft edge of the seat. So I've marked center of the board here, which means I need to measure 25. I'm going to repeat that process for the forward edge. Join that line, we're going to get that slight taper on the end. Now I just need to pick up the bevel from the horizontal top of the cleat or riser to the planking wall. Okay, so here's a little trick to figure out how to transfer the distance to the front face. We're going to draw a horizontal line across. Then I am going to put my bevel set with the right angle on here, go from there. Then we take our ruler and we measure that distance, and it is 13/16. So if I transfer, let's see here, we join these two lines on the front face. Trace that line across. Now I'm going to be cutting this on a bevel like so, because that mark that I made was the shortest distance on the bottom side. Just place my bevel here. And we measure that distance. Let's see, it should be 13/16. Repeat the process for the other end. Should be the same angle. I'm just going to set my table on my bandsaw to that angle. Now with the aft seat, it shows that the notch should be dead center. So we are looking at 6 1/4 on the end here. So 3 1/8 would be dead center. So that has to come out. Have to be careful that I don't bang away at it too much, because I'm just going to split away edging there. What I'm going to do, bring my hand out of the way, just going to score through here so that as I chisel it out, I'm not going to rip pieces off the front face. So after chiseling, whittling, and cutting off the ends a little bit on a different bevel, I think I've got a pretty good fit in there. It's sitting nicely right down on the riser, and it's clearing the frame. So just a little bit of cleanup. I'm going to run it through the planer because it is thicker than required. which I will try and do one pass on the underside and then take most of the material off the top side, because if I take it off the bottom side, it just makes it shorter. So I've drawn out the pattern on the 4 seat for the mast partner. Basically will go in here, and nice gentle lines coming down to the proper width at the ends. And I'm just going to cut it out in the bandsaw and clean it up. So I've created a shape on the foredge of the forward thwart or seat, and that'll accommodate the mast partner going down to the mast step. It's a little bit of a rough edge right now, but it's doing a dry fit. And that sits in there quite nicely. So now it's just a matter of cleaning it up. I wanted the curved forward edge of the front seat or thwart to match up with the stern portion where I'd laid on the mahogany strip for wear and a little bit of accent. So after shaping the forward edge, I then laminated on a whole bunch of layers of mahogany and clamped up with some epoxy, and I think this is going to look pretty smart. There's just a tiny bit of gap in there, which I'm sure will fill with sawdust and epoxy. We'll trim off the edge here. Should be able to put it in place. That's where she will sit. I'll figure out where the hole is going to go, the size of which is required to hold the mast, and figure out where the mast step will go, resting down on the keelson. I think that's where we'll end this week's episode on building the thwarts. There's still a little bit of work to do on them. You know, I gotta sand them, and I'm gonna route some edges and then install them with screws, whatever, permanently. And with that, we're gonna work on starting to build the forward and aft compartments with framing and plywood. So that'll be next week's episode. Thank you very much for watching. Hey, do give me a thumbs up or maybe consider becoming a subscriber, and we'll see you next week.